Welcome to this Automation World video podcast sponsored by Schneider Electric. This podcast looks at how predictive asset analytics is further enabled by the industrial Internet of Things. I'm David Greenfield, Director of Content at Automation World, and joining me for this discussion is Rob McGreevy, Vice President of the Operations Asset and Information Software business at Schneider Electric. Now, predictive analytics has been on the cutting edge of industry technology trends for the past several years now, as more and more companies move away from reactive and scheduled maintenance processes. And they've been doing this by making better use of the technologies available to them, many of which they often already had in place, such as sensors and data acquisition devices. And these companies have been using predictive asset analytics to stay a step ahead in their various maintenance and repair activities, and even eliminate some unnecessary steps. And with all that's been happening with the advance of the industrial Internet of Things over the past few years, that's really served to ramp up applications of predictive asset analytics, since this kind of analysis is almost a low-hanging fruit for an Internet of Things initiative. So Rob, looking at this from an industrial technology supplier point of view, what do you think about the megatrend of the industrial Internet of Things that's impacting all industry verticals today?
So the industrial Internet of Things is probably one of the largest megatrends we've seen over the last couple of years. And as a business, we've been focusing primarily on what are the high-value business cases or business solutions, the value that we can derive from this industrial Internet of Things. And in particular, we start with the solutions, and we look at what are the key value points that we can deliver by vertical. And as a manifestation of this Internet of Things, what are some of the applications that we can bring to market? But essentially, the key difference for us is what are those key business values that are enabled by the industrial Internet of Things, and what are the key solutions that we can bring to bear in those markets that we serve.
Well, let's look at this trend now from your customer's point of view. Do you feel like your customers really understand the industrial Internet of Things and have specific areas of interest in it yet?
So the industrial Internet of Things has been it's been a very interesting thing, but it's also a confusing thing for a lot of our customers, primarily in the industrial manufacturing and infrastructure markets that we serve. And a lot of this confusion is from the fact that in this industrial world, we've been doing a lot of the industrial Internet of Things for many years. So there's part of the confusion is, well, what's new and what's different about the industrial Internet of Things or this so-called IoT? And in that area, what we've been able to describe to our customers is it's essentially an extension of a lot of the things that we've been doing as the leader in this market for a long, long time. So things like connecting to devices and sensors is nothing new. We've been doing that for decades. What is new is the confluence of these sort of low-cost, high-fidelity sensing technologies that are out there in the industry. The second thing that's sort of changed that we have to explain to customers is that when you bring in more of these sensing technologies and more of these devices, you have a lot of high-fidelity process and production data that needs to be stored, organized, and contextualized in order to drive those high-value applications that are essentially the real reason why the industrial Internet of Things is meaningful, and applications such as predictive asset analytics. So for us, the confusion that's in the market is what's new and interesting about this that we haven't been doing already. And as I said, there's quite a bit that we've already done in this area, and we see it as largely an extension of things that we have done for the past 10, 20 years, but particularly with a focus on those business line applications and solutions that are enabled by the Internet of Things.
Now, based on your experience working with customers on industrial Internet of Things projects, what are some of the more interesting and impactful improvements you've seen come about as a result of this new approach to combining technologies and analyzing all of this data?
Yeah, so there's a lot of hype around the industrial Internet of Things, but there's also a lot of very important and interesting, impactful applications that we have seen for it. So beyond the hype of, hey, broad connectivity is important, or you must have a platform to connect these devices, for us it's meaningful applications. One area of that is the area of predictive asset analytics, taking a look at all the sort of large-scale capital equipment that's used in industrial manufacturing and infrastructure, and how do we better optimize that equipment for performance? How do we make sure that it's more reliable, that it's operating safely? And that's an interesting use case for us, and one that we've seen quite a bit about. So in this area of predictive asset analytics, we see two things. One is the need to connect all the high-fidelity sensing and sources of information that are out there, thermal data, vibration data, for example. So we add more connectivity. So there is that piece of it. And then we store that information in a very high fidelity data store. So we capture, we collect, if you will. We organize that information, and then we lay on top of that predictive asset analytics. These are models that essentially know the behavior of different equipment types, how they behave in a normal state, how they behave in certain operating windows. And then when we see deviations, when we see problem areas, we flag those things, right? We alert those things. And that's what predictive asset analytics is all about at the heart of the matter. And it's predicated on having broad connectivity, high fidelity process production data, and then this predictive analytics engine or rules that sort of complement it. Now, rounding all this out, it's not enough to just predict that there's an imminent failure. It's what actions are you going to take? And that's where we close the loop, if you will, on the whole entire process. Closing the loop on this industrial Internet of Things means not only connecting these things, putting them in context, and applying predictive asset analytics, but it's also flagging and creating work instructions, for example, or taking corrective actions to say, hey, this particular piece of equipment may fail, you should go inspect it, or take it out of service, or do certain things. So for us, closing the loop with the business is another key piece of this whole industrial Internet of Things.
Now, beyond the aspects of improved performance and safety and quality that we hear quite a bit about when it comes to predictive analytics, what other kinds of value are you seeing achieved by implementing this kind of technology?
So the value of predictive analytics and the technologies is one question that we get quite a bit. And one of the largest areas that we get is purely cost avoidance, and that is related to equipment failures and reliability. So as an example, some of our largest utility customers that implement our asset predictive analytics technologies have documented savings of tens of millions of dollars in cost avoidance by basically having documented what we call catches. And a catch is essentially where predictive asset analytics has caught or predicted an imminent failure. And so that can be essentially quantified as tens of millions of dollars easily in some of these large-scale utilities. And so certainly the value varies by industry, but that's a very clear-cut case where we see quite a bit of business value.
Okay, so one last question, Rob. Given all the possibilities we've talked about today around the industrial Internet of Things, if you were taking the next steps to modernize your business to improve asset reliability and performance, where would you start?
So if I was trying to look at where to optimize performance, reliability, et cetera, I would first look at, what industry are you in as a client or a customer, and then take a look at what are the business challenges that you have. If you're a utility and you're just trying to focus on uptime and reliability, then be clear about that as your objective. If you're in a process industry and you're trying to look at minimizing costs, or if you're in CPG, food, bev, and you've got margin issues and it's a performance-related thing. So just be clear about what your business objectives are. That's really the first thing to do, because the technologies are there to solve all sorts of problems, but having a very clear perspective on what you want to achieve is probably step one. The second step on that is to be very selective about the areas you want to target. So if it's in power generation, you'll have a certain set of equipment or machinery that you want to target. CPG, food and bev, same thing. There's going to be more machinery and equipment that's more important to the process versus less important. So I would say be selective in the areas you want to target to achieve your business directives. And then the last thing would be is to fill in the appropriate technologies and platforms that are essentially proven right out in that industry that have done these things in the past. So for example, find a technology provider or vendor that has a history steeped in these types of industrial manufacturing applications and proven track record for these types of industry solutions. And just be on the lookout for, there's a lot of hype about connectivity and big data and all these things, all necessary. But once again, focus on the business areas you're targeting and look for industry-specific solutions from vendors that have those capabilities.
Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you for joining us for this video podcast. For more information, please visit the website shown here.